Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a tropical system that is currently developing in the Gulf of Mexico that could bring some impacts to the United States over the next several days. We'll also be breaking down the massive pattern change across the country coming this week and the threat for severe weather over the next few days. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll begin with the Gulf of Mexico, which is the area that we're going to be talking about a lot of in the next few minutes, and that is right now where we have a 70% chance of a development of a tropical depression or storm over the next 48 hours, and it has a pretty impressive spin that you'll see in a moment on the satellite imagery. But again, that is something that we're watching for very closely to bring some impacts to areas near Florida. Now, throughout the Central Plains, there's some convection out there today, some showers and storms that'll continue for the next several days. We have some trough ejections coming from the southwesterly flow in the southwest United States that'll continue to move up to the north and east and bring some more severe weather, which even tomorrow we actually could see some very significant severe weather in the southern plains, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, for that tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico, this is the current satellite imagery, and it is pretty impressive. We have a lot of convection around this system. We have that spin going counterclockwise. That is obviously what a tropical storm would do, is have that counterclockwise spin. With any low pressure system, it's counterclockwise, and then high pressure systems, it's clockwise. But in this case, we do have a pretty defined spin. Here's your low pressure system. It's centered right there, and it's actually a fairly organized system for only being not a tropical storm yet. It's Invest 91L. It is sustaining winds at 35 miles per hour as of the 2 o'clock update today. But again, a lot of convection on the north and east side of this storm. We don't have a whole lot here in the southeast side of this storm right now, but if that starts to develop more, and if the wind speeds pick up in the center, we very well could see a tropical storm develop within the next 48 hours. So something to really watch out for closely here in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, as I previously mentioned, there is a 70% chance of development over the next 48 hours with this tropical system. It's going to be something to watch for very closely in the Gulf of Mexico because it could bring some impacts to the United States. And this is the future radar with this tropical system. So bringing you hour by hour today, we'll continue to see that spin well off the coast of Florida. Kind of just sits there in the Gulf of Mexico. You'll notice there will be some showers and storms in Florida, some of which will actually kind of spin off from these outer bands of this ongoing little system, Invest 91L. Once we go into tomorrow morning, that is when the spin becomes more defined. That is when I'm fully expecting this to be either a tropical depression or storm. I think it's going to become much more organized by tomorrow morning. Once we get into the afternoon and evening hours, you'll notice the HRR model is bringing this down to the south. Now, computer models have been honestly all over the place with the track of this, especially 48 hours ago. They were bringing it down to the south, the east, the north, and even sometimes the west. I mean, there was really no key direction to where the system was going to go. Now, most of the computer models in the most recent runs have been bringing this either to the south or to the east. So there's only two options really right now where this could go, and that's all due to the really upper level winds, kind of how this is going to be steered here across areas in the southeast. For the wind gusts, you might be wondering how strong this actually get. Again, we're looking at the HRR model, and there's plenty of computer models showing different things, but the HRR model in terms of the wind gusts continues to keep most of the wind off the coast of Florida. You'll notice here wind gusts around 50 to 60 miles per hour near the center by tomorrow morning. Now, it does not necessarily mean we'll be looking at a high-end tropical storm, but we very well could have at least have some sort of tropical storm by tomorrow morning, pending that there's no shear to really rip this thing apart. Once we go into the afternoon and evening hours, you'll notice the HRR model does peak this around 65 mile per hour wind gusts, which in terms of sustained winds would be around 50 to 55 miles per hour. But again, question is, will it actually get there? We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But regardless, really the winds are going to stay mostly off the coast of Florida if this does take the southerly path. Now, if this does somehow go off to the east over the next 24 hours out of nowhere, we very well could see the wind gusts get upwards of 40 to 50 miles per hour. But again, I am not really confident that that'll actually happen. I do think the system will stay down to the south, and most of the computer models are on the same page as well. A lot of the computer models that we're looking at are bringing this to the south, but you'll notice near the end here, some of them spin it around areas in the southern Gulf of Mexico, and some others actually bring this towards the Keys of Florida. So this will be something to watch for those in southern Florida particularly. We very well could see some gusty winds at least. However, it will be running into some shear as it moves down here to the south through areas in the southern Gulf of Mexico. So again, something to watch. I'm not too concerned about this, but it will at least bring some heavy rainfall and as well as gusty winds, and even some beach erosion is possible along the west coast. For the tracks on the ensembles as well, they have a fairly similar path. So at this point, it seems likely if this does become a tropical storm and it does organize, it will likely impact areas in southern Florida. If not, it might kind of circulate down here near Cuba. So a couple different options that could happen here over the next 72 hours, maybe even the next 5 days. That's kind of the time frame that we're looking at here. This is day 5 and this is day 4 and day 3. So you'll notice again, by day 3 this will be down near Cuba. Day 4 it's probably gonna be somewhere in South Florida, and then day 5 it'll be back out into the Atlantic Ocean. And this very well could become our first tropical storm of hurricane season. Again, hurricane season just began today. And this is another tool that we use. This kind of gives us an idea of all the computer models and where it brings the intensity to. Again, most computer models are keeping this somewhere at a low end tropical storm. Some of them only keep it down at a tropical depression or less, but there is a chance this could be a little bit stronger. It just depends on how much shear there is by the time we see this develop. And if it develops sooner, we very well could see the potential for at least some sort of middle grade tropical storm. But again, regardless of its intensity, I don't expect many impacts to the United States. And if you're concerned about rainfall in the southeast, I'm not too concerned about it. Most of the rainfall from this tropical system will be off the coast. Upwards of a foot of rain could even fall in the Gulf of Mexico, which again means nothing for inland, but you'll notice there will be a chance for at least a few inches of rain in some areas on these, really the panhandle of Florida. That's where we're going to be watching for the potential for upwards of maybe 3 inches of rain in some isolated locations. We could actually get upwards of 4 to 5 inches as well. But again, I'm not very confident that we'll be looking at a widespread flooding event or anything like that. It'll be pretty isolated overall. All right, let's talk about the rest of the United States now. We'll begin with the pattern that we have with the jet stream, beginning with what we have right now ongoing. So as of now, we have a high pressure system back into the Midwest that's keeping areas dry and warm. Back in the Southwest United States, we have trough ejections ongoing, which basically means we have low pressure systems coming into the United States. They're actually increasing the threat of severe weather across the high plains right now. And then overall, that's really our setup right now. We have a massive block back over into the Midwest, and that's going to continue throughout the weekend. You'll notice back over into the northern plains, that is where that massive wall of warm air will actually be. If you didn't watch yesterday's forecast, we talked all about this. Make sure to check that out. But this is where we're basically going to be seeing a huge wall of warm air, and otherwise we're going to be seeing a couple low pressure systems back over in the western half of the United States. Those could bring some severe weather back down through areas like the high plains, maybe even into the Great Plains. But really right now, the threat of severe weather is very low, and overall the threat of rain in general is very low for a large chunk of the country, because this massive high pressure system is just keeping areas dry and as well as warm. Now, is there any hope for anything in the near future that we could see that maybe move? Not really. I mean, you can even see this is going into next Sunday, so this is 2 weekends from now. You'll notice that high pressure system is still right here. We have a low pressure system down here. Unless this somehow kind of squeezes by that high pressure system, I just don't foresee any sort of huge pattern changes in the United States over the next 7 days. This is going to be the main one that we're going to see, and it's going to continue to stay here for a while. I mentioned the wall of really warm air, and we'll really see that as we go into next week. You'll notice back areas in the Midwest, northern plains, and southeast. That is where we could see some high temperatures get into the 90s and maybe low 100s if you're back down in Alabama and even Mississippi. There is going to be that potential for some really warm air, and that will continue all the way through early next week. So something to really watch out for. And a friendly reminder, we are now in meteorological summer. That starts on June 1st, and then official summer starts on June 21st for the atmospheric summer. So interesting stuff there. Obviously, we are seeing that warmth start to creep in to a large chunk of the United States. Now, for the severe weather tomorrow, there has been a pretty big upgrade. There is an enhanced risk of severe weather for West Texas, and this is going to include areas like Midland. Amarillo and Lubbock are also in the track of some severe storms tomorrow. Main concern will be large to very large hail. Upwards of 3-inch diameter hail is possible in that hatched area. And then overall, outside of that, we could still see some sporadic hail in those green shaded areas. That's a low threat though overall. Tornado risk is also not really high. It's not on the lower end, but there is going to be a chance for at least a couple of tornadoes. That's primarily going to be back in Midland areas, and as well as maybe back through the Amarillo and Lubbock region. But overall, again, severe weather tomorrow will actually be a little bit more concerning than what we've seen the last few days, because look at this. By tomorrow, we'll see a massive explosion of storms from the Texas Panhandle and even into southwest Oklahoma, or southwest Kansas, excuse me, back through areas in the hill country of Texas. This is where we could see some massive supercells. Some of these could very well produce some very large hail, damaging winds, and maybe a couple tornadoes. This up here back through areas in the Texas Panhandle, I think will be mainly damaging winds and hail. Might see an isolated tornado, and then back through the hill country. That is where I'm more concerned about the very large hail potential, and as well as the threat for maybe a few tornadoes. So definitely something to really watch out for tomorrow. We'll keep you posted with the latest details. Make sure you subscribe down below and like the video.